piece I'd like to talk about today is using clean questions in semi-structured interviews when it's a one-to-one interview. So one of the first things that I do is I spend quite a bit of time working out what the questions are that make up the semi-structured interview. So for example, if I'm doing a piece of business change work and it's just a very general piece, I might use the basic metaphors at work questions, such as when you're working at your best, you're like what? An ideal team for you is like what? Currently this organisation or team or department is like what? And if this department were to evolve so that you could work at your best more of the time, then it would be like what? So that might be a very open baseline. But for example, if it were a project about learning, about creating a learning community, it might be when you're learning at your best, you're like what? An ideal learning environment is like what? In order to produce a sustained piece of self-directed learning, if you think about having done that in your past, what were the conditions that allow you to do that? So I think that the creating of the semi-structured questions is vital. And I might run a very small pilot with the commissioners of the project to just, so I'll ask you these questions, I'll expand them with clean language questions, and then let's just check, did we get the kind of information that we're hoping to get from our wider group. But once I've got the semi-structured interview questions, then I'll start with it, and almost whatever I get, I'll then just augment with clean questions. So for example, if it was the research at Liverpool John Moores University, so when you're learning at your best, you're like what? Whatever they say, you just start to build on it. So let's say one of them says, oh well, I'm just organised and I like to do everything in the right order. Okay, so you just like I was doing a clean language therapy session, I'll match. I won't use the deep hypnotic trance-like language that you often use in symbolic modelling. For example, I won't go, and you're well organised, and you like doing things in the right order. And when right, is there anything else? It would be too hypnotic, it would be too trance-like. And unless I'm really going for tacit information, it's not appropriate to an interview situation. I'm more likely to say, and you're well organised, you like doing things in the right order. And when the right order, is there anything else about the right order? Well, yeah, I like to know where I'm going beforehand and then unpack it. So you like to know where you're going beforehand and then unpack it. When you know where you're going, where does the know where you're going come from? So as an interviewer, I'm building from whatever's presented, I'm building out, and I will have an end goal, i.e., I want a nice, clear model for how this interviewee learns. So I will be going, if they keep telling me what it gives them, I will be pulling them back and thinking, oh, so where does that come from? And what happens before you do that? And what happens before you do that? Whereas if they keep talking to me about the preparation but not the process, I'll say, okay, so when you know where you're going and you've turned up at your lecture, what happens next? And then what happens? And then what happens? And after the lecture, what happens next before the next lecture? So you, as a clean language researcher, you do need to be able to think about models and be able to place your attention in the right area of what they're sharing to make sure that you get the information that you need. One of the things that we do after we've gathered the information, and remember of course as well, some people talk a lot more than others, so some will share lots and lots of information. What I try to do there is I try to make sure that my interview topics take about the same amount of time, or they get the same amount of airtime. So there are some who speak less, and I might use more questions. Then once I've got the information, what we'll then do is thematic analysis. So I might, it depends what we're doing the research for, but if I think about the metaphors at work, when I look at what they're like when a senior management team, when you're working at your best, you're like what? An ideal team is like what? Currently this company is like what? And if it was to evolve, it would be like what? I'll take those interviews, I tape them, we transcribe them, we tidy them up, we send them back to them and say, this is what we've got from you, could you check that it's accurate, check that I haven't misheard anything, and is there anything that you'd like to augment or edit? and then we get that back. Once we've got a piece that they're happy with and that we're happy with, then what we do is we'll do them for thematic analysis. So so perhaps I'll send them to a colleague who wasn't part of the interviewing process. What they'll do is they'll read through them and maybe highlight themes. So for example, this company is currently like what? I'm thinking of a specific client, which is in chapter 9 of the book. And they're talking about, it's like there's lots and lots of cogs spinning, and they're spinning really, really quickly, but they're not quite connected. And so even though we work really hard and we're trying our best, we're not getting the results that we need because there isn't the connection. And in a different metaphor, somebody's talking about, they said, what it's like is it's like we're in a boat, we're going down a river, and we're veering to one side of the river. And so we all run around to that side of the river. We start pushing away and going, hooray, we're pushing away from the bank. But what we don't notice is there's another bank, and now we're pushing towards that bank now. And so we're constantly going from one place to another place, but not actually getting to where we want to go. And so we will go through this for themes that emerge. So it might be I think so in that one it was a firefighting, a waste of energy, a lack of overview, or a lack of a strategic plan that people were working towards. So lots of people working in silos, lots of disconnection. In the boat metaphor, the people who were involved, who were supposed to know where they were going, were inside and didn't know what was going on either side. So they kept arguing about why hadn't we got there yet. But the people on the top didn't know where they were going and were constantly rushing from side to side of the boat. So one of my colleagues will go through that for themes. Then the same document will have been sent unmarked to another colleague, and then I'll have gone through them myself as well. So that's 3 different people will look at the documents and go, okay, what are the themes that we think are emerging? Highlight them, write them to the side, and then we get the information back together and we look at what are the patterns that are uncommon to all of us. When there's a theme, one of the things that we do, I think you can adjust these figures depending on what you're trying to get, but we've got a general, if over 50% of people mention the theme, we'll say it's a theme that's worth bringing back to the group's attention. So we check that we're happy that these are the themes that are coming out. If they're mentioned by at least 50% of the people, I start to compile them into a report. So I say, here's a theme with a couple of metaphoric examples of it. Here's a theme, a couple of metaphoric examples of it. Here's a theme, a couple of metaphoric examples of it. And this is a really useful way to then bring back to the project sponsors and to the senior management team and say, okay, here's what we're noticing. Not Trevor said this or Sarah said that, but here are some themes that are current across your team. Here's some little examples of them. What would you like to have happen? So that's clean questions, quite a fast pace, quite a conversational pace. You use them with a purpose to build up an answer so that it's really, really useful for you. You do thematic analysis to make sure that it's a piece of information worthy of bringing back to the group. And then you're still bringing it back to them and saying, so what would you like to have happen?